Let's start with some major news, probably. China. China is one of the main topics internationally. Of course, they are trying to play on a field that we started to discuss in the previous stream. They're trying to play their influence and affect the situation with war. And I would say that for now, everything goes along the non-negotiable scenario between China and the West, and situation is in somewhat development. People are talking already about possible UAVs that China can supply to Moscow. Some talking heads are talking about ammo and some materials and components that China can send Moscow, can supply Moscow with. And that is on the background of the principles voiced in their documents about sovereignty and integrity. But this somehow goes to the escalation bucket for now. How far do you think it'll go? What is interesting, Mark, in the last few days, I was surprised by a group of very sharp statements from the United States towards China. The biggest of them was blaming China as the source of COVID, essentially pointing the finger at the laboratory and saying that China was behind the global pandemic of COVID. Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs already came out and asked to not speculate on this topic, but this is a serious accusation in the global scale, basically, of provoking an artificial crisis and concealing the information about its source. Second, today American Congress voted to ban TikTok. Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs reacting in line of why you're afraid of children's stories. Secretary of State Blinken of the United States is in Central Asia, in a very interesting for China zone, Kazakhstan and the other stands in that area. So these are screaming news pieces. What they are screaming about is that collective West warns China rather sternly to not participate actively in this military conflict with equipment, military munitions, or any support to Russia. China, in essence, just stuck his head up to try to participate in the military process. Immediately, it caused a very serious reaction of the West, which might mean, I don't know if it 100% means that, but it might mean that the West has a very strict scenario how to deal with China if China becomes a little too active in the world. So they cannot, you think, allow China to be at the table of negotiations with them to try to negotiate the outcome of this war. Do not want or do not or can't. Regardless, they definitely are against China participating in that. And two of the major slaps in recent time was accusing Putin in being responsible for MH17 being shot down over Ukraine, and China in releasing COVID onto the world. So this might be an early precursor to the next Cold War. And basically telling China and other possible Chinese allies that things are decided, we're already taking sides, we are seeing this conflict through, do not engage. And of course, this is the war in Ukraine is the core culprit in these communications. We also understand that China is in a precarious position. They cannot push too hard. They have very big disbalance in their economy, in their population, where they have very poor villages and very rich upper middle class and billionaires in certain geographical areas. So it's the country of contrasts. But China is 85% dependent upon exporting their goods to Europe and United States. And every sanctions in this regard are super painful to China. And this is what the West seems to be indicating, hinting towards. Do not mess with this, otherwise you will face very serious consequences to that. So remember we talked about Bali, that they might agree how to split the world. There might be another eventuality such as a next Cold War, or it could be a third option where it kind of continues to go helter-skelter one way and then a little bit the other without clear definition. What we're looking at now very sincerely reminds me of the second variant of the possible Cold War scenario unfolding. And this is exactly why I'm thinking that the scenario where China actually supports the Russian Federation with munitions, with supplies, with anything that can be used for this war is very minuscule. China doesn't really want to have this conflict. Because another side is you are in counterposition to your own statement. Your statement says that you are for territorial integrity, so you're not acknowledging Crimea to being annexed by Russia, you're still considered to be Ukrainian territory. And then you do what? Come and supply the belligerent party in this war, the one that went to attack. So that would definitely be another question to pose to China. I think they will start opening some supplies to Russia, but nothing military related. Also, good point Forbes posted recently. In June, Russia will have a dilemma to continue funding this war or to keep paying pensions, because they will not be able to do both at the same time. And what will happen in Ukraine? At that time, Ukrainian offensive, Russian army Ukrainian offensive will run out of steam, and that's when Ukraine will supposedly start to push back and roll them back. And this will be another fork in this conflict that will be a decision point for the world and will basically a scenario picking of the world. And the signs of that fork already are here. United States are saying, we don't care if you attack Crimea, and an attempt of a big player to come to the board was taken very sharply, and they were sent messages that you are not welcome here, do not come to that board. So these are significant signs. If to conclude that block that there is a scenario, China probably is aware as well that there is a scenario. They wanted to participate in this conflict, and they got a very hard no, do not join. And of course, they're a big country, they're the second economy of the world, they're one of the members of Security Council and the United Nations, but they were told down, they were told to stand down. Yes, Alexei, I hear what you say, because in this light, it is a very strong message. Because on one side, the West is making efforts to not allow that new union between China and Russia, and the other side is that they're not even going to let China be at the table of negotiations as equal, not even as a regional power, superpower, that they should not be participating in that negotiation. Because I personally think Russia was already given to China after this war. It was decided, no, Mark, I don't think so. Russia has value for the West. It was important for them as the buffer between the East and the West. So, one more important thing, when China is talking about the territorial integrity, the other side of that statement is also about Belarus, about their territorial integrity. And Lukashenko's visit to China, I think it's also an attempt to use Chinese rhetoric to cool Moscow down a bit, to send a message that China also has special relations with Belarus, and China does support territorial integrity. And Recently, they had a 4-hour meeting. They concluded some agreements. That's a lot. And I suspect Belarus will engage China closer, trying to use their influence to stop Moscow from any shenanigans with their territory. And some people might say that I'm romanticizing things, but I'll repeat the thesis of about a week-long stream, that Moscow is being led into a very narrowing corridor where the end is going to be nigh. Lukashenko is part of that picture, and Moscow's tentacles are being torn off from its neighbors. That is a signal to all the players of the big and global world that Russian Federation will need to make a strategic decision altogether, not even about the Ukrainian war or their war with Ukraine, but about their general position in the world. That is why people were, I think, surprised when after Moscow left Kherson, and yes, there were some consultations, not official negotiations, but at least consultations with Kremlin, to try to probe and see if they would understand the difficulty of their position so that the world can put this war out. And Putin revealed himself as a non-negotiable person who decided to send everybody to hell and said he'll continue with his politics regardless of all the push. And that's, I think, when the decision was made that Russia needs to lose it. I do remember that meeting, Burns' visit to Ankara in Turkey. And there was Naryshkin, who was meeting with Burns, and Burns did mention that Naryshkin was very aggressive in his communication. So that might be one of those signs. By the way, you do have some sort of dancing lights or discourse. What's going on? Now, I was just checking something on my screen. Sorry, Mark. So yeah, it is a very hard story. It tells us that scenario exists and they do not see other participants in this scenario. And I don't think China is happy to see that too. Right. But it is a good news for us because that means that China will not be effectively supporting Russia. If they're wise people and reasonable people, they will not be supplying any military support to Russia, and so far they have demonstrated China that they do. They are very logical. So this is a disappointing moment for Moscow. And the war, if it's not in its final stage, it's in a very decisive stage now. You can also see that on that informational background, that they are running out of resources and Moscow is facing several very bad choices. One is worse than the other. If you turn left, that thing dies. If you turn right, you die. But yeah, Alexei, they're not believing in their defeat still. They're still in their own world. They don't, right? No, they don't believe. That's my feeling of Moscow, and that's pretty precise. They do not believe they will lose. We have about 300,000 watching us. Please continue sharing links and click the like button. It's a bit better dynamics for us. See, more people are able to join us at that hour. Yeah, it is better for the audience, but it's harder for me because it's martial law here after a certain hour, so I cannot travel too much in the city. Oh yeah, so guys, please respect Alexei, because otherwise he will not be just jobless, he might even go to jail. So, okay, dear viewers, there is another news coming out right now that in Yeisk, which is Russian territory, they have an airfield burning. About 10-15 minutes ago, the messages started to come through that there were some explosions on the airfield, and there are some videos and pictures showing fire and smoke. There is no information about the airport itself, and what is damaged and if anybody was wounded or killed as a result. So this is not a single event. There were several events before, the day before and 2 days before that. So basically from St. Petersburg down south to Azov Sea, right? Yes, so before we go to the map of active military actions, do you think it's targeting? It's a process of targeting going on and they're figuring out the capabilities? I think it's a special topic that might deserve a special stream, but I would say that it might be, for now, I would just say that these are partisans who are becoming active. And if Putin now is talking about possibility for Russia to be separated by the West into different regions, I would just play along with Putin here and say that maybe Ural republics is attacking the western part of Russia via partisan detachments. So let's just play along with that narrative. Oh, you know, Putin actually called them scoundrels. Yeah, and yeah, he is attacking possible threats within Russia. Putin is a horrible figure for Russia, Mark. He brings only terror and horror and death to the country. And given their hard economic situation, I think part of their statements today about the need to harden everything, harden all the controls in Russia, is also aiming at the future eventualities that might start unfolding when they run out of money, when people will be revolting about food and income. And basically, his message to his people is that we will continue pulling you out of your lives and sending to the front to die, and we will not compensate you for that. And if you will try revolting or rebelling against that, we will find means to put you in jail or to shut you up. And this is how the government of Russia is taking care about its citizens. Well, this is predictable. Speaking of perspectives here, I think that Ural partisans still have a lot of capabilities and they will continue practicing their skills, and the lights will be coming ablaze brighter and brighter night after night throughout Russia. Now about the front line. Yes, let's bring it up and let's go over that. In the last 2 or 3 days, they, of course, shelled civilians again. First of all, Kherson region, Kharkov in the north, Donetsk region, of course. Kremenchuk, I saw in the news, yes. There was an attack by Shahids. Today, 2, or according to some statements, 3 X-22s. There was a small strike. And every day, there are, unfortunately, human tragedies happening throughout the country, and people are dying. And we'll try to support some of those as much as we can from the proceeds of your activity in our store. Now, about the front line, in Vuhledar, down south, they're still trying to push, but they already have lost over 160 armor units in that area. New York Times actually called this one to be the biggest defeat, the biggest tank defeat in this war. Yeah, there's other news writing that it's 130 tanks and armored vehicles that Russia has lost. Yeah, some sources say 130, I've seen 160. But the statements themselves, the title of the biggest tank defeat in this war, it deserves attention. That just outlines the skill set of Russian commanders who are sending their troops to go and die. And today there was another, I thought, funny video when a tank team is sitting in some little trench they dug for themselves near the burnt-out tank, and they're pointing at the tank saying, well, it's there, it's burning, but we're still winning, we will win. And they're still not evacuated, they're basically sheltering in place, waiting for maybe somebody to come save them. So, Bakhmut, Avdiivka, Marinka, still hot areas. Bakhmut, we did acknowledge the difficult position there. Today, the speaker of our military came out and said that we are not giving up on Bakhmut. The command is continuing to defend the positions. Some Russian forums are talking that Ukraine is actually pushing back, but that needs to be re-verified because it's their statements. In Kremennaya and up north, they are attempting some actions, but without much success. So Bakhmut is the center point of the events today unfolding on the front. So you think Bakhmut is still going to stay for a while? Yeah, well, it depends upon the military command. They might make a decision to withdraw from Bakhmut, but leaving it doesn't really have any significant consequences. We'll just push out and take the next line of fortifications. So you're welcome to continue Russian troops and grind yourself off the next level, the next row of fortifications. So direct value of Bakhmut is to grind the attacking enemies down. The moment when the city is too wasted, is too ruined, it cannot be used as a fortification to effectively destroy enemy troops, then you can withdraw from that and go full back to the next line of defenses. So you should understand that it makes sense to hold the town for as long as it serves the purpose. The moment when it stops serving that purpose, the military can withdraw to the next positions. But I think our peoples are mature enough and we've seen everything during this war, so we will understand the logic of our command, even if they decide to withdraw from Bakhmut. Remember Severodonetsk and Lysychansk? There was no catastrophe there. We withdrew from there timely, and their situation was much worse than now. There was no yet Kharkov operation. We haven't taken Kherson back. Ramstein was not a real supportive event still, and they were dropping 45,000-60,000 shells on us daily. There were actually some areas of front where our soldiers were shelled for 15 hours a day with their artillery. This is horrible, and still our troops held. And even now, when it is somewhat sharp around Bakhmut, we do understand that our counteroffensive is nigh, it's imminent. We are waiting for more materials to come to start that, and the West is supportive. So I think our troops are in much better physical and psychological condition than back half a year ago. Okay, we have about 340,000 viewers. Please, my usual ask, continue clicking the like button if you have not done that yet, and of course subscribe to Fagin Live, to Alexei Arestovich, and to the Privateer station. This is very important. All right. In your view, one more question about supplies of armaments. The last ones that we saw in the list were UAVs that are being given to Ukraine, and there were different communications about tanks. It seems like Russian propaganda is playing on the tune that tanks will be delayed, will not be supplied in time for spring counteroffensive. How do you estimate that matter? I have one very logical argument, Mark, but unfortunately I cannot name it right now. Remember that tweet of mine that basically shows that everything, there is an indicator that shows everything is good with tanks, with preparation of the offensive. And they know it, and they're just trying to play that game. Russian propaganda is rather stupid. It does more harm often than good. They're either boosting wrong expectations or dampening down the correct ones. And when China stated, for example, that there will not be military supplies in China is for territorial integrity in Russia internally, they were screaming that now weapons will start coming from China and Russia will easily win this war. So total opposite of what's happening. And when China unfolded that, even Medvedev came out and said that, oh, we don't care about Chinese plan, we'll look at that later. First we'll get to Poland, and then we'll look at the offer by China. So I think we are good. I think we have everything ready. I think we're just waiting for good weather. So when the fields become dry, yeah, middle of April, roughly, because the tank needs some drier soil in order to not get stuck in the mud. And I would say about middle of April. I think everybody understands everything. And if American analysts are drawing the plans of Ukraine troops taking Crimea or entering Crimea, and General Hodges is, for example, an important figure. I've met him in person, and when he talks about that, that's a significant sign. He was the commander of U.S. troops in Europe. He's one of the highest levels in American command in Europe. And when he's looking at the situation of taking Crimea back, I have no concerns that we will be there, we will be doing it. Speaking of equipment, it will be supplied on time. 700 tanks and 1,000 armored vehicles, that's total numbers, and there are other interesting elements that we're seeing. Germany promised to send an experimental equipment that is very highly programmable to fight drones and UAVs, and that's basically an experimental defense system. For example, as we see, German military complex is really interested in using this opportunity to test out their weapons, because in the international weapons market, there is a line that says combat-proofed. So if the weapon has it, it has a higher demand, and our allies are using this opportunity to prove some of their designs. Also, an important thing that we are getting trade on a scale of battalions from the commander to the cook. And besides that kind of training, very advanced one, we are getting a system of a tactical fight, tactical battle fight, which is increasing a tool that can increase our decision-making times over. This basically is a collision of internet with the Cherepano brothers' steam engine. This is the war that Ukrainian troops are being prepared for. So if we are equipped with these tactical systems, our ways and our speed of making decisions at the front, at the battle, will topple anything that Russia can provide on their side. So I think our Starship troopers will shine in the future offensive. But if indeed we are, this is not I cannot fully confirm that, but if we are indeed going to use an integrated system of battle command, tactical battle command, will be 2.5, 4 times faster in making tactical decisions than Russian side. And if you manage to make 4 decisions and they barely got enough information for one, then your losses will be times less than theirs. And if the fighting will be on the southern front, where you do not need to do direct frontal attacks, where you have a lot of ability for maneuvering, for encircling, for flank attacks. So I think, in my estimations, our counteroffensive will be liked by most viewers, by most those who are paying attention to what's happening, except for one country, right? I would even say country, one side of that war, who will be the butt of that. Okay, we're almost 32 minutes live. We have a little bit of time. We talked about Moldova and your plan that you outlined, that even before the end of war there may be some events unfolding. And the continuation, we did not wait for long to see Moscow pick it up. They are starting to prop the party of some criminal dude Shore, the husband of their singer Jasmine. He's a rather mafia figure, so they brought him in, brought him more activists from Russia, as I understand. I don't know how they made it to Moldova, but they're starting some work on updating their fortifications on the border of Transnistria and Ukraine. I think they're preparing for a possible entry by Ukrainian troops to Transnistria.